the Create in Tasmania webinar. So we are highlighting the topic of transition to independence. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional owners of the land of which we meet, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you so much for all attending our webinar. We've got some fabulous guests and young people attending. If I could get the guests just to quickly whip around and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Sonia Pringle-Jones. I'm the Child Advocate for Children and Young People in Care.
Hello, I'm Leanne McLean and I'm Tasmania's Commissioner for Children and Young People.
I'm Maddie Smart. I'm the Transition to Independence Coordinator.
Great, thank you. I'll just hand over to Jubilee first. She's going to tell us a little bit about her transition to independence journey.
My name's Jubilee. I'm 19. I was in foster care for about 10 to 11 years and I transitioned to independence in 2019 when I was only 18. I was in a very proud headspace when I transitioned to independence. At 18, it didn't go amazing, and I ended up living with a friend for a couple of months, which didn't go well either. I felt like once I had transitioned to independent, it wasn't a top priority for the department to assist me into getting into housing because I still needed help. In the end, I found myself in a homeless shelter, living alongside others who had their own issues, such as drinking and smoking. It was difficult. There was lots of drama, and I didn't cope very well. I made a big move to Hobart after finding my current job. It was with the help of some amazing old respite carers who are now called family friends that I was able to make the move. They provided me with a roof over my head while I waited for housing and connected me to other services. My old caseworker also helped me out with this transition, connecting me to housing services, the TILA program and aftercare support. I found a home during the COVID pandemic, which was very lucky. It's hard to transition from care when you're 18. You're on your own, and simple things like knowing how to use a washing machine are stressful. Housing is also difficult to find and stressful to know where to start. I had done some Create Your Future workshops that gave me some skills and knowledge about how to apply for a house. So these programs are very handy for the transition to independence.
Thank you very much for sharing your story around transition. And I'd like to invite Monet to share her story now.
I'm Monet, and I was in out-of-home care for 14 years. I'm now 20 years old, so my transition from care was a couple of years ago. At the time, I was living with a carer. I was lucky enough to be connected with Create, and they told me about some of the support that could help me through the transition to independence, because I didn't have a caseworker. I haven't had a caseworker for as long as I could possibly remember. I strongly feel that young people who are on a guardianship order should have someone from the department check in with them when they are transitioning, and maybe even do a transition plan. Like, there's so much I still haven't done that I would have liked to have done and had done by now. But I was lucky enough to stay with my mum when I was 18. So like my carer, she didn't kick me out. And we had an arrangement that I paid like board, some people call it rent, whatever you want to call it. But that was nowhere near to the expense of what rent is. Like, rent's phenomenal. Paying board helped me like to plan a budget and to plan the money I would have to survive off, and to like put aside to buy the necessities like a washing machine or a clothes dryer or airer. Or when I was 18, I was a lot more immature, and if I had to face being homeless, like, I don't think I would have had the strength or the knowledge to be able to do that on my own. I'm proud to say that I live independently now in private accommodation, and I run my own business where I receive a stable income, and I would have struggled to be able to do this when I was 18. It's very important that young people have the opportunity to stay with their carers and to access the help that is out there for us and have access to priority housing if the option isn't there. I'm proudly the person I am today because I wasn't kicked out at 18 and I wasn't left homeless, jobless, moneyless.
Thank you very much, Monet, for that beautiful speech. It's really great to hear that perspective about you having come from a guardianship background. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so over to you, Lara.
Hi, I'm Lara. I'm nearly 17. I've been in foster care since I was 2 days old, as far as I'm aware. My transition to independence started early when I was about 13. At the time, I'd had 17 foster families and I decided I couldn't cope with the emotional trauma of losing families anymore. And as a result, I asked for another option. I was then placed in what was supposed to be temporary residential placement. I remained there for 3 years instead of what was supposed to be only maybe a month or so. It wasn't until I was 16 and had spent years speaking up for myself that I was finally able to transition. I moved into my own house in April of this year, right as the COVID pandemic hit. As a result, I found it quite difficult to access essential services that I needed to help me through the move, like grocery delivery services and electricians. My water was also out for a week after I moved in, as there was no one available to connect it. So I was having to buy water and I couldn't shower, and it was not fun. It was a challenging time. I had some support from an out-of-home care organisation that helped with household supplies, such as a fridge and bed. But when I transitioned to independence, I lost access to a key child safety worker. I've not met her in person since COVID. I don't know who it is fully or anything like that. So this made accessing and figuring out things like Centrelink and Tiller allowance difficult. I know that I wasn't able to even spend all of my Tiller. Some of it has just been kept. I don't know where it is. And I also have not been able to get my license due to the fact that I do not have access to a car or a worker to get my hours up. So I ended up doing a lot of this stuff on my own. I also had to learn how to budget pretty quickly. Turns out I suck at saving money because I didn't get that practice. Unfortunately, transitioning to independence also meant that I lost access to an emotional support network. And whilst I like the freedom of being independent, I don't like the loneliness. To cope with the loneliness, I bought 3 emotional support rats. My baby boys, Freddie, Jason and Vlad. Again, it took a few years of advocating and fighting for my support rats. And Leanne, you would have been around for some of that. It was a bit of a nightmare to be able to own them. And that includes reaching out to the CEO of an out-of-home care organisation just to get the permission to own my own pets. My rats, as unorthodox as they are, have helped me cope with living by myself, my stress levels and my loneliness. I think it's highly important for all young people to have access to pets, especially those who are transitioning. Having a creature that you can care for and gain company from is a very useful thing. There are also a lot of challenges when it comes to being so young and independent, such as getting school forms signed and being able to go places, as I've found I've had to use Ubers a lot and I don't have a whole lot of money to be able to do that, to get to like appointments or meetings or literally just leaving the house to go somewhere. Transitioning to independence has been tough, and you need to speak up for yourself and also take advantage of the programs and workshops that Create run. I think that something young people who are beginning to transition should know is that you should take advantage of any and all support offered and available to you. I definitely feel that I was let down by the department and my caseworker in that aspect. Something as simple as a cooking workshop or budgeting could make the difference in your success in living alone.
Thank you, Lara. Thanks for that perspective as well. It's so great to be able to see that you stood up for yourself and transitioned to independence early. I'd now like to move towards the part of the webinar where we chat with our guests. We've got a few different questions lined up that the young people are going to ask. So starting with Jubilee.
What should young people expect when they're reaching the leaving care age?
It's really interesting when we think about what you should expect. The feedback I've received from young people with a care experience is that you actually start worrying about leaving care pretty young. and Lara, you're probably an example of that when the transition process started early. And for young people I've spoken to, they've told me that it sort of starts at around that 12, 13 mark, if you're under some sort of 18-year order, that you start to think, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And that's happening in the environment where you've got school to worry about, friendships to worry about, and everything else. The law in Tasmania around care currently ends at 18. So the law says that if you're in care, the government is obligated to do certain things to make sure you are cared for until you are 18. We have a policy as well as the law, which says that we're going to give you extra help beyond 18. And I think it is until 21, but that's a little bit grey, I understand. It could be more, could be less. And it's on a case-by-case basis. So that's a policy which is different to a law. A law creates an obligation. A policy creates one too, but it's one that can be changed pretty easily. So I think coming back to Monet's point about how we should make sure people have support beyond that leaving care age, I think we need to give a fair bit of thought about what our law says. And if there's an opportunity to extend what the law says, we should think about it. And they've done that in Scotland, for example, where the law means that you have obligations as a parent until a child is 18, and then beyond 18, you still have obligations to provide support. Not all the same things as a parent, because you're an adult after 18 and you're operating in an adult world in a different context, but there is still a need for support. Birth certificates, licenses, setting up houses, all of those sorts of things.
Thank you, Leanne. Sonia, would you like to talk a little bit on that question as well?
In the context of my role as a child advocate, a lot of it is about being able to make sure that people are aware of their rights to start with, but that the adults are then acting on them and making sure that those rights are being upheld. And so I think for young people transitioning to independence, there's four main rights that I'm going to touch on. And the first one would be the right to be safe. And I think your story, Jubilee, couldn't be more poignant and, profound in explaining that. Having place provides a degree of certainty that you otherwise it is really hard. A second right would be your right to have relationships with the people that really matter to you. And that might be family, it might be biological family, foster family, it might be within your culture and your cultural community, but it's also, and this is an interesting one which you've touched on, Lara, it's about those professional relationships as well, whether it's with an out-of-home care organisation or your child safety officer, your worker. These relationships are absolutely critical. Another one would be your right, I've kind of clumped this, I've been a bit cheeky, I've clumped this right into one that I'm going to call the right to have your tools. So health, education, birth certificates, Medicare, Centrelink, accessing your driver's license stuff. They are such critical tools that help you to find your wings. The last one is the fourth right. And I think this is probably one of the most fundamental as well, is that you have the right to participate in all of these conversations, all of these plans, and all of these decisions as you are gradually approaching the age of 18 and beyond. None of this decision making should be happening without you. Otherwise, it runs the risk of being the wrong decision.
Thank you, Sonia. I love the way that you were able to relate all of those rights across to everything that the young people have said so far. Maddie, would you like to comment on that question as well?
Yeah. So at the moment, all young people from the age of 15 should be having regular conversations with their case manager about planning for when they are leaving or starting their transition from care. So for Lara, for example, those conversations should have happened a lot earlier. As Leanne has said, they probably do need to start happening a lot earlier than what they already do. So every young person should have a leaving care plan updated at the age of 15, 16 and 17. And the plan should be focusing on setting goals with you and stepping out how you can achieve those goals, no matter how big or small they are. So if you don't have a leaving care plan, you can definitely pester your case manager about starting to have one, because they're really important. This is such an important step for you to have your say about what happens in your life. And talking about a care plan, it's just a really good step to make sure that you are heard, and that all of the people and all of the adults in your life are listening to what you say. And we also now have the Transition to Independence program, which is a new program that's up and running. It's been in place for roughly a few months now, but we can start working with you from when you turn 17 all the way up until you turn 21. So that's something that's really helpful. We want to make sure that you've got the best start from when you leave care.
Great, thanks, Maddie. It was really so fantastic just to hear, to hear about all the things that should be happening for young people when they're transitioning and preparing to transition. So, Monet, you've got the next question for our guests.
I do, and the question is, what options are there for young people turning 18, and where can we go for help?
So there's 2 different programs across the state that young people can turn to for support when they turn 18, and through their transition from care. And your case manager should be telling you about these. And for young people that are on third-party guardianship, the Aftercare Support Service actually sends out a letter letting you know about what supports are available to you as well. So we've got, first of all, the Aftercare Support Service, which is a service for young people aged 18 to 25, and that can help you access some financial support to help you meet goals. That's available up until you turn 25, and it's up to $2,500 per year. And it's just a fairly simple application process, and then all of the applications are reviewed every fortnight. So it's fairly quick, and it's not too time consuming for you. There's also the option to have your files reviewed, your child safety files. We can also help you with your TILA applications, which is the Transition to Independent Living Allowance, which is $1,500, and you can access that from when you turn 15. That's really helpful just to help you prepare for leaving care, so you could buy a fridge or a washing machine and things like that. There's also the option to discuss any abuse in care that may have occurred, and also support to find family, which can sometimes be really difficult when you're in care, because sometimes there's conflicting messages and you just want to find out the truth and get to the bottom of it and reach out to those people who you've lost contact with. Then our new program, which is the Transition to Independence program, or T2I. So that is available to you when you turn 17 up until the age of 21. So when you turn 17, our plan is that the advisors, there's one in each region, they will make contact with your case manager and organise to try and meet with you so that you know who we are. And what we can do is to work with you on what we call a future goals plan. And that'll help us to identify what supports we can offer you. What we would like to do is identify if there are any gaps that we can support you with. So what we're finding is lots of people don't have Centrelink yet, which is really bad, or a housing application in. So we'd like to be able to fill those gaps that are in the system at the moment and figure out what support you need and help you to access it. If you're not sure who to contact, just contact us. And then when you turn 18, it's completely up to you if you want to work with us or not. The different things we can offer through the T2I program when you're over 18 is crisis support. So if you find that you're in an emergency situation and you need help and you're not sure who to turn to, then give us a call and we'll try and sort out the issue and work out a plan to help get you back on your feet. And then we also have some longer term options for you, which is called case coordination. And that is where we'll figure out what you need and then we'll hopefully be able to refer you to some other services and put a team around you again, which is probably a little bit like what you've had when you've been in care. So it'll be more of a team for when you're an adult, just to make sure that you can work through what you need to do. So those things might be to help you get support from the NDIS, or pulling together services to make sure you can get stable housing and accommodation. That brings me to the last arm of the T2I program, which is the extended carer payments. So for your carer to receive this payment, you need to be on a legal order when you turn 18 and still living with your foster or kinship carer. So this payment can remain in place until you turn 21, and it just helps you to keep studying, stay with your family, and just helps you just develop some more independent living skills, and so you don't feel like you have to find a new home as soon as you turn 18, which I know a lot of young people have struggled with over the last few years.
Maddie, thank you so much for going into detail about what young people are able to access, because it's so important, and there's a lot of young people out there that don't know what they can access. Like Monet mentioned, she had no idea that there were services out there that could really help her through that time. Yeah, okay, so I'll hand over to Lara now for the last question.
What happens if we go into lockdown again for COVID and you're about to move out or planning to move out at that time?
It's a really good question, Lara. If we go into lockdown, your rights as an individual, but in particular as somebody who's been in care, they don't change. So the processes should continue with your views at the centre. There might need to be some tweaking around the edges and delays, but moving house during COVID is something that has been occurring right around Australia. In fact, moving states is still occurring right around Australia, and therefore transitioning to independence should still occur, and we need to find ways to make sure it occurs regardless of what our COVID status is, because the reality is we're going to be living with COVID now for some time. So it might need some tweaking around the edges, maybe a few days grace, or a little bit of extra time, but it should still happen. But if you're not comfortable with it happening and you don't want to move, we need to be able to facilitate that as well. And that's where reaching out to support services, if you've got a caseworker, they are really important. If you haven't, which by the time you get into those closer to independent stages is not uncommon, I'm afraid, to not know who your caseworker is or whether or not you've got one. And if you haven't, you need to reach out to the people through Transition to Independence, or you can reach out to someone like Sonia, who's there to advocate on your behalf. And I think it is worth saying that neither of those services were available several years ago. They are now. They're incredibly important steps in the right direction, and they, take them up, take those services up. They're really important.
Great, thanks for that, Leanne. And Son, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, look, I think I would only echo what Leanne has said. It is that if there are any struggles that you're experiencing, whether there's a pandemic or not a pandemic that's actually unfolding, it is to keep asking. And whilst I know that that's actually not easy sometimes, it's easy to sometimes feel a bit like you haven't been heard, and it actually becomes really hard trying to keep asking or to keep making the phone call. But that the fact that there is now the T2I program, the Transition to Independence Aftercare Support Program. I imagine we might have some contact details at the end of this webinar of the actual phone numbers or web addresses. Same for me as a child advocate. A big part of what I often might do when someone reaches out, it can be really quick, and I might just be that person that helps connect you to the right people within the department. And then those people in the department know that I'm aware of your situation, and that I'm keeping out, eyes out on what's actually happening. So I guess in short, I would say don't suffer in silence. keep asking and keep reaching out to the services and the people.
If we're talking about a more residential care environment, so if your 18th birthday is approaching and you're feeling worried about that because your order expires at 18, if you're in a residential care environment that's being facilitated by the department, and the last thing we need is for people to get worried about what happened, where they're going to be sleeping after their 18th birthday because we might be or might not be in lockdown. I think what I'm hearing is that that is not going to happen. That is simply not going to happen, and there are supports in place in the department to ensure that it won't.
Thanks, Leanne. That's really good to hear, and I think that it's comforting as well for those young people, because they might not know, they might be thinking exactly that. So it's really good to hear that. Maddie, do you have anything extra you'd like to add?
I think what I would just say is that the T2I program or aftercare support is only a phone call or a text or an email away. If you want our support, we would love to hear from you. I think what we've noticed is that some of the young people that have been coming to us for support over the last few months, so during COVID and probably more recently, they sort of feel more comfortable reaching out as a first point of call by text message or by email. And we're more than happy to communicate with you in whatever way works. So if that's what you're comfortable with, then we're okay with that. And I think just as long as you feel comfortable to reach out, then we are here to support you. And that's really our goal. We just want to make sure that you feel supported during your transition from care.
Great, thank you. So we're just wrapping up now, and so in the last stages of the webinar, I'd just like to throw back to the young people and whether they've got a message for, I suppose, other young people out there that might be transitioning, or for key workers that around, what's important for them.
For workers around leaving care, just support your young people, please.
And Monet?
Yeah, I sort of really just agree with Jubilee. Like, we shouldn't ever be made to feel as though we're on our own. And a lot of the time we do, especially when we're undergoing a lot of stress, like transitioning into care, like individual care, sorry. It's one of the very lonely, scary times that we face. And just check in on us. Like, we're human too. We've got feelings too.
And Lara?
I was also going to say to the workers, remember who you're supposed to be looking out for, that they're kids. It's not just a job, and they can't be left to their own devices without help, especially when moving and things like that. Once they're in that situation, it's not a matter of, well, now they're independent, I don't have to do anything either. They're still children and they need help, and you need to stay around and help them with that.
Thank you. Thanks for those sturdy messages. That was great. And I'd just like to also just chat a little bit about some of the stuff that Create can do to help with that transition process as well. So we're funded by the government to provide the Go Your Own Way kits to young people that are 16 turning 17, and so it's kind of midway through the transition. So the kits will be sent out, and there's a booklet which with a cover that looks like this, Go Your Own Way. So this booklet was devised from in consultation with young people around what their needs were for transitioning to independence. So it's a bit of a checklist of all the different domains of well-being, and also the different things that young people will need when they're transitioning to independence. So the caseworkers are essentially supposed to work through that booklet with the young people, and carers as well. So it might feel more comfortable if there's carers working through the booklet as well. So yeah, keep an eye out for those when you're 16 turning 17, but you can access them beforehand. So the booklet comes in a PDF and it can be accessed on the Create website. And we'll put those details at the end as well, or on this screen. So the other thing is we've got our Create Your Future workshops. So they've been around for a number of years, and we're funded to do them in Tasmania. So they're on life skills. They're based on different things that young people have said that they need support with. I would like to thank our guests again today for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. and particularly our young people, our young consultants who you've done, Lara, Jubilee and Monet, you've done an amazing job, and thank you again for sharing your stories, because I know that it is a bit hard sometimes to get the confidence up to do that, but you guys were just amazing, so thank you.